this off. All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Wicked Energy. I'm here with my man, Giles Powell, Director of Brand at SLB. Giles, welcome to the show. I'm super happy to have you on, man. How's everything in your world today?
Really good. Thanks, Justin. It's a pleasure to be here. It's going to be an awesome opportunity to have a chat with you. So thank you so much for the invite. Yeah, day's going well. Thank you. End of the week. It's a Friday.
Yeah,
You've got me evening my time, so I'm relaxed. I'm ready to roll.
Well, I mean, first of all, where you said I'm happy to be here, which we're in Zoom land, obviously, but where are you at right now? Like, where are you sitting physically?
I'm sitting in my home office. Okay. I've got a load of builders around the house at the moment, so luckily they've headed home for the weekend. But we're just south of London in a town called Reigate, which is lovely. It's kind of on that rural urban boundary. So we've got green fields to the south of us, a town to the north of us. Wow. And it's about a 40-minute commute into town, into London. So
that's not bad.
Best of both worlds. Absolutely.
So when you say commute, I'm assuming it's different than my commute here in Houston, that everyone just piles onto I-10. Are you on the train or on a bus?
We are. Yeah, very few people now commute using a car into London. We have all these different taxes that are applied on a daily basis, and they're automatically applied as your car transfers into the center of London. You'll be charged a congestion charge, and you'll also be charged if your car is polluting. We have something called the ULEZ zone, the ultra emissions, low emission zone. And so you're charged those two taxes based on the vehicle that you drive on that day. And it can be as much as $40 to $50 when you add them up. Yeah, so it gets expensive if you're driving in town every day. So a lot of people take the train. And the trains, most of the time, are okay. We've been through a few strikes recently, so we've had to be patient. But my train trip is a single trip, nice and easy. I get a table and a chair. I do a bit of work. It's a great time to get ready for the day,
because my career started off in Calgary, Alberta, and man, I would take the bus. It would pick me up right out, about a block away from the house, and you could, for those who needed more sleep, you could have a quick nap. You could catch up on the current events, news, fire off some emails. I always said, when self-driving cars come, I can't wait, because I feel like I could be so much more productive.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? So I do admire, the way you guys do transportation over there. My wife and we went to London, Rome, and Paris, like in 2018. And it was just, I love the way we did our transportation. And there was a train, I don't know if it was London to Paris, but it went under some big lake or something. And it was just so cool. The countryside, ripping through there on a train. It was such a cool experience, man. I love that.
It is nice.
Yeah.
It's great when it works.
That's good. So there's probably not too many F-250s on the road right now where you're at. Hey?
You do see a few. Yeah. Very, very rare, but you do see a few of the 150s and the 250s, no doubt bought over by a passionate Brit or American who's now in the UK. But
I'm gonna keep burning gasoline. I'll never stop.
or it's an Ecotech Mustang,
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome, man. Well, it's I'm sure it's just a matter of time before everyone's on the EV train, which is a whole nother interesting topic of conversation. But we're not here to talk about transportation, folks. We're talking about brand. And before we kick things off, Giles, I love branding. I love marketing. Just that whole ecosystem I find super fascinating. So I'm curious for you, what was the first brand that you remember ever impacting you? Whether it was a child, maybe it might have been your cleats for soccer, or maybe this pair of pants. Like, what brand were you like, you know what? I love this brand. Do you remember?
I do. You've caught me off guard with that question, but I do remember it very well. And it was Virgin. Richard Branson and Virgin. And for me, it was the story behind the man. Yes. Richard Branson's story is incredible. Wasn't traditionally educated, kind of, came out of school, very much the entrepreneur, and he created a brand which now he can apply to anything. And it's a true distillation of brand and brand value. He applies it to aircraft and trains and, all the other ventures that he has as well, originally in music, right? Virgin Records. So that's the one, that started me thinking, what is brand about? You know, that was really pushing at the time for me, the
Yeah, no,
boundaries
that
of
what a
brand.
fascinating answer. You know, it's again, when I look back, brand for me was Nike. I grew up playing sports, and
Yeah,
if it had a Nike check, I was buying it. I always had the
yeah,
latest Nike basketball shoes and the Nike cleats and the
yeah,
Nike, you just it was Nike for me. But then too, like Sesame Street, like that was a brand. Like even
yes, of
before I
course it
started playing
was.
sports, like the
Yeah.
Sesame Street, like anything to do with Sesame Street, it was,
Mm.
and now it's other things for kids. You got Roblox and Minecraft and just the brand around those, and they create action figures and toys and then clothing, and
Oh yeah,
it's brand is so fascinating. I think people, whether you like to admit it or not, people are connected to brands, and it really influences purchase behavior, right, or consumer behavior,
absolutely.
which again is super fascinating. But I was just curious, and so Virgin, that's a great answer. I would imagine you're probably one of many who would answer that too.
But yeah, and for me, I love those sort of pioneering challenges, the extreme sports. And Richard Branson in particular was always pushing the envelope with his balloon journey around the world.
Yeah.
And he's done lots of other stunts, and I truly believe those have valued the brand. He has built a lot of recognition in Virgin because of those stunts that he took on personally. And
Yeah.
I recently met Bertrand Piccard, who was the gentleman who is a Swiss gentleman who joined him in that venture. He now runs
Way.
an organization called the Solar Impulse Foundation, which we're involved in.
Huh.
And he's a fascinating guy. He also flew around the world in a solar powered airplane,
No way. I didn't
which
even
was
know that existed. Solar
pretty
powered.
awesome. Yeah,
Wow.
and he stopped off in lots of countries, started in the Middle East, went through the US into Europe, and I saw it
Huh.
land. When I was living in Oman, I saw it land at Oman airport on its trip. But it was fascinating, absolutely fascinating. But those stunts, I think, are a great vehicle for brand.
Yes.
And
No, 100%. No, that's
Branson,
fascinating stuff. So I want to add
mm,
value right out of the gate for the listeners, Giles. So I've got a great series of questions and
yeah.
conversation, but first and foremost, what for companies looking to improve their brand, what's the lowest hanging fruit that can easily be addressed? Does anything come to mind?
I think it's understanding as a company what you do best. It's distilling down those qualities. What's your USP, and really getting it distilled down and focusing on that as you develop your brand.
Hmm.
I think that's probably one of the most powerful things to focus on as you build your brand or as you rebrand as well, depending on the aim and the goals of what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah.
Um, in the energy industry in particular, and this is new to me as well, as I've been in this role now for 2-3 years, is understanding the need for education. That in itself can build a lot of brand. I'm quite passionate about the different opportunities to help educate people on the complexities of the transition,
Yeah.
what we can do as an industry in that, and breaking down some of those misperceptions,
Yeah.
and helping people to understand the nuances. Um,
Right.
so you can certainly focus on certain tools as you rebrand or develop a brand to help, certainly in the energy industry in particular, which I do think has an energy branding problem, to improve image, improve
Yeah.
brand, improve business as well,
Yeah.
inextricably linked.
No, I think that's a great answer. And I think as companies scale and become larger and perhaps globally centric, when you ask every individual who works within the organization, what do we do best? I would imagine the bigger it gets, the more loosely defined it gets. It's like, well, do you mean like our department or like the company or like
Right.
our group or and I think it's important to define that and to just like preach it day in and day out, right? And so
Absolutely.
it's a great answer. Which leads me into the next sort of topic I'd like to talk about is
Mm.
brand strategy. And the
Mm.
first question I have behind the importance of brand strategy is how does brand strategy intersect with the overall business strategy in the
Yeah.
energy sector? Let's kind of kick it off there.
Yeah. They've got to be linked. They've got to be absolutely aligned, singing the same song, right?
Mhm.
What you deliver in your business strategy will be a proof point to your brand promise. And your brand promise has to be developed. The brand itself has to be developed knowing that it's aligned with the business strategy. And sometimes companies will launch a brand, rebrand, and take the opportunity to evolve their strategy at the same time. And I think that takes time then for the business strategy to deliver on what the brand is promising. So they've got to be aligned. Some companies will have a strategy that's already delivering, and actually the brand needs to play catch up. And therefore, in that situation, you've got a brand that has a bit of an advantage. We're already branding a company that's delivering on its strategy and the brand promise. You're going out with some proof points already cooked. And that's certainly the case with us, and it helped a lot. But there are lots of different applications of brand and strategy, but they've got to be aligned. They've got to sing the same song.
Yeah.
And I think, and I've seen this recently, strategy is complex, and it can be very, very hard to get the strategy down to the front line. Your frontline managers who are making those decisions on a day-to-day basis. And sometimes it's easier for a frontline manager to understand the position of a company developed by the brand and its values, which is also connected to brand. And they're starting to make decisions based on that sanity check. Can the position, which is normally simpler, the brand position, help guide business decisions? Which is obviously, if it's aligned with strategy, you're all going in the same direction. It's a new tool, it's a new channel for the strategy. So they're completely linked, and they've got to be developed in harmony.
Yeah. Do you measure the, I guess, not the impact, but is there a way to qualify whether or not it's working? Like you said, they have to be aligned. How do you guarantee it, or how do you measure that to make sure that they are? Is there any metric or anything that you guys use? Or I mean, it may be tough answer, but it just
brand measuring brand is for some industries very easy. I think for us it's a little harder. You can look at sentiment. Is there positive sentiment, negative sentiment overall toward a certain brand? You can start to look at it. It's normally over a longer timeline, the decisions you're making, not just acquisitions and contracts and technology development, but also divestitures. And are they all going in the right direction?
Yeah.
Fundamentally, and I was told this by the head of branding of ABB, one of the most impactful measures of brand success was the increase in unsolicited job applications to ABB in the months after the rebrand.
I was going
to say, okay, it's so tangible. You can go to an executive and say, look at this. This is what's happened. We've rebranded, and it makes a lot of sense. You can really feel it. So certainly recruiting is a wonderful pH test, right, of a brand, and does it work? So there are a huge number of metrics you've got to pull together. The last metric, which does take a little longer, is how brand can pretty much increase profit, and reduce that time to purchase. It's the whole buying journey, customer experience. If you can connect it, shorten it, compress it, give them a better experience, maybe put a bit more emotion in, then your brand should be improving your pricing power, as people will pay a little more for your brand. So you can measure that. You can measure your pricing performance and your pricing power. And those are slightly longer term, but you'll start to see if brand and strategy are aligned, they should come.
Right. No, I'm reading a fascinating book right now, and it's kind of research heavy, and it's what good service companies know and do, and they're talking about like there's a direct correlation between employee satisfaction and customer loyalty, which also ties into
absolutely.
Brand, and in the financial health that the company does have and profitability, and it all is linked. And again, there's no like, you can correlate things, not necessarily identify the cause, like because of this, it's that, like, it's all, like you said, if it's all kind of moving in the same direction, it's a cumulative effect. And so no, it's but again, to your point, like if you have people at the door looking to come work for your company, it's not there. I doubt they're looking at your Q1, 2, and 3 earnings calls. Absolutely. They're probably looking at I love the website. I love
That's it.
I love their social media presence. They look so cool, and look at all this technology they're pumping out, and
Yeah,
they're like capturing people's emotions. Like, I don't know what they're doing, but I want to be a part of it because it looks
absolutely.
badass. You know what I mean? And
That,
it comes down to
absolutely.
brand,
Yeah.
and that's it.
Yeah. No, you're right. You're right. And I think you can, to your point, if you can get your employees, your people engaged, they are your brand. They are the ones facing your customers. They are the ones developing your technology. And if they stay or put a little bit more effort here when needed, or stay a little later then just to help out and make it happen, that adds up. All these little things add up. And if brand can keep them engaged
Yeah.
and help them feel a sense of belonging, and that's what's, in our case in particular, people turn around and said, I feel like I belong now. I can see myself in this company. I can understand what we're capable of and where we're going and what my part in all of this is. Suddenly they're not embarrassed any longer. And I think that's this energy industry branding issue, is that people have been embarrassed to say that they're part of it in certain conversations, and maybe more, certainly in my experience in Europe versus other, certainly, cultures and locations where it's a bigger part of society.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been great to hear some of that feedback and hear how that's also helped other companies as well.
Yeah. So for one of the challenges I find that we have, and I live in the drilling fluid space, but it's quite complex, right? There's a lot of technical jargon, to the like everyday consumer of any good. They're not looking at us and being like, oh, I can touch and feel that. Like, I know what that is. So in an industry often characterized by our technical complexity, how do you make your brand strategy engaging and relevant to the everyday consumer, or the people that don't know about energy, that are coming out of school being like, I want to go work for that company, versus say a Facebook or an Uber or whatever?
Yes. Yeah. It goes back to that point. I think you've got to over-index on education. You've got to own the responsibility of educating people on that challenge. And there's a great, some of the supermarkets in the UK, there's a great example where they took school kids and they walked them down the aisles of the supermarket, and they said, look at this bit of food. And they gave them the background of how that lamb chop or chicken breast came to sit there on the shelf, because it doesn't appear in a bit of packaging. You put it in the oven, cook it and eat it. There's this chain, and understanding that chain is so important. And I think we've got to take on the responsibility of helping people understand the complexities and the whole energy chain from pour to flicking on the light switch at home. So that I think is an important part of the brand strategy, education. One thing we found that's really worked well is a clearly defined verbal identity. How do we speak as a company? What is our personality? And that addresses the complexity of the language we use, of the sentence structure, of the length in which we write. We typically have been communicating. I'm guilty of this. As engineers, I'm an engineer, and I talk as if people really want to listen to what I'm saying, right? And I've got to recognize what it is that they want to hear and what it is they want to know, and that's probably the second part. You've got a verbal identity. You've got the need to understand your audience, your personas, define them, what makes them tick, what compels them, and write for them, and write for that audience. So I think that in that more, and it's only going to get more complex. You've got to focus on those few things.
Yeah. I mean, and you've kind of alluded to it, but at the end of the day, energy, and especially oil and gas, because that's the world I live in, it's a people's business, right? Like, for this to all happen, it's strategic relationships, it's partnerships, it's internal, external collaborations amongst various groups of people. And so I'm curious your thoughts on the role of branding in establishing and nurturing business relationships within the energy industry. How critical is branding to sort of increase or enhance that?
Yeah, with that sort of point around brand being a single story of strategy and values, culture, I think ensuring that people can understand the brand, understand the values of that company. And I think more and more people are doing business based on values. is this a company I want to work with more
Yeah.
than ever? So your values have got to be reflected in your brand.
Yeah.
They can't be hidden as they have been in the past. It's been very much an internal message, right? Our purpose, our values, our culture. This is for our people. Yes, but surface them, because your people who reflect your culture will be the ones doing business with your customers. So I think you've got to, I think that's a big part of helping those relationships, having clear values and helping certainly align with your customers in that regard. But I also think it's about telling a story. You know, you've got to have a brand that helps you tell a story, and we've not really had that so much in the past. We've got something that has so much background, so much purpose behind it, that there are some wonderful stories that you can tell, and I think that really helps to make a connection, an emotional connection. Someone said it's you got B2B, you got B2C. What about B2H? You know, there's business to human. Because it's them, you're doing business with them, you're doing business with humans, as humans that inevitably make your purchase decision. And so I think that's a wonderful thing that stuck with me, you know. So there is emotion in human relationships, can be very, very positive.
Yeah. So storytelling is an interesting. I've read and done some research just on like the art of storytelling, and whether you're submitting a big RFP or you're branding or anything, it's that the power of storytelling is huge, which kind of goes, you know, especially in energy. I mean, there's so many companies, there's so much competition. Like, how does effective branding contribute to a company's competitive advantage to kind of help set yourself apart? I mean, would you say branding can help with that, or?
Absolutely. I mean, more than ever, I think the energy industry is going to become increasingly commoditized, and that we brand that will maintain or offer a premium. And it's for some, it might be service delivery, it might be safety, it may be technology, performance, delivery, integrity. There are lots of elements of your business that you can ensure roll up to your brand. And if you can build your brand to be recognized with all of those elements in which you deliver, obviously with integrity, and you've got to be transparent with that, then brand will offer that pricing premium. We talked about a good brand will drive a pricing premium. In a commoditized market, that's what will win. Your brand will hold that value. And there are plenty of examples of that. Actually, there's a guy who's focused on energy branding. He's done a PhD in energy branding. He's a fantastic guy. And he gave us a little result of a small survey that went on in the US, which was, if Apple was to provide your power, your energy to your home, would you switch? With no other information. And 60% of people, and it was a few thousand that were surveyed, would switch to Apple.
No way.
So the power of brand there in a
Big
industry
time.
that Apple has no influence or kind of an understanding of, drives a customer decision. So yeah, absolutely. So I think brand can offer a pricing premium, a different experience to a business that may be, or an industry that may be commoditizing. And I think it's not always, and it's a colleague who told me this, it's not always the best product that wins, but more so it's the best brand.
And
that's a case of commoditization as well. So yeah.
And you see that so much on the consumer side, right? Like it's people will often buy things because of the emotion that they feel when they think of that and that company, right? That's such an interesting study. That, and who is it's a gentleman that is the
Friedrich Larsen. He runs a conference called Charge Energy Branding.
That's right. Yeah.
And he's a wonderful character, and he's got some great experience in the sort of power and value of branding. So he's got some great stats from different surveys he's done.
I know we talked about it a little bit when we spoke on before the episode aired, but it's for someone to study that. I hadn't had a chance to look more into it, but I'm certainly going to.
Great.
It is. What would you say? You know, we kind of talked about it, but the oil and gas, or just the energy industry in general, I think, to be honest, like just looking at it very high level, like the renewable side, or new energy side of our business has done a great job of branding. I mean, they've captured the minds and the hearts of different demographics for whatever particular reasons. But historically, the traditional energy, oil and gas and stuff, I would say we've had a branding problem for a long time, often misunderstood, a lot of times for our own reasons, because of how we typically deliver our message. It's kind of like, I told you so, you need us, we don't really care what you think. At least that's the perception a lot of times. And even, I was thinking about this, when you look back at like books or movies, when you look at, if you were to ask someone who's not in the industry, like, describe an avatar of someone in say oil and gas, it'd be like a cowboy hat, kind of rude, money falling out of their pockets, big cigar, cowboy boots, dirty. And then you look at like movies. One of my favorite movies is Zoolander, and they're at the gas station. And any scene at a gas station in a movie is death and destruction, right? It's like, oh, what caused that? It's the gasoline. Like, oh, of course, in oil and gas, it's bad. And, and things like that. Like, it's, so how would you describe our branding problem? And why do you think the energy industry, just in general, faces a branding issue, especially with the increasing environmental and social concerns going around, just climate change and the rest of it?
I think in the past, and this is my opinion, because I've probably upset a few in saying this, but we've been very arrogant as an industry, right? I mean, you've mentioned a little bit when you were talking to the question, but I think we've been a little arrogant, and I think we've been quite passive for the last 50 years in our branding. We've relied very much on our technology and the delivery and what we're bringing to society, and we've not really focused too much actively on the brand. And in that situation, and that's probably happened more over the last 20 years now, if you don't craft your brand, somebody else will do it for you.
Yeah.
And a lot of the time, even with a personal brand, sometimes that's okay. Go ahead and let people craft your brand. It's based on what you deliver. It's based on that mark that you leave, your legacy, etc. And that might be okay. The challenge we've got is with the context of the industry and what's going on with this. Someone referred to it as energy illiteracy. I don't know if that's always fair, but it was a term coined in CERAWeek this year in Houston. With energy illiteracy, without a deep understanding of the industry, if you don't craft your brand, then I think others will not craft it positively for you. Right. There isn't sufficient understanding of what we can do, what we're capable of, what we're trying to do for it to be positive. So I think fundamentally the problem is just we haven't focused on brand sufficiently. It's been a very passive effort. And I think going forward, we've got to be a lot more active in developing our brand and educating. I go back to this point of education. I'll harp on about it, but I think it's so important.
No, I mean, you need to suffocate people with that understanding. Is like, unless we're educating, people are going to draw conclusions based off of headlines.
That's it.
And inform themselves and draw conclusions based off of that, which typically are in the past have not been good. Which kind of brings me to my next point is, it's like, how does having a branding problem affect market dynamics, public perception, and even the regulatory landscape, which drives policy?
Yeah, so I'm quite passionate about this feeling that the industry is considered monolithic. It's one big machine. And if you're in that industry, I've stereotyped you. You talked about that stereotype. It's so much more complex, even from operators and producers. It's IOCs, NOCs, there's independents. You've got service companies, technology companies, you've got entrepreneurs, you've got tech startup, you've got the whole ecosystem. And at times, they have very different parts to play in the transition and in the industry itself. And I think if people could better understand that, and certainly branding could help in developing that understanding, then I think you have a very different conversation about what it is you can do, and the industry has so much to offer outside oil and gas. If you're decarbonizing cement or steel, or looking to leverage the incredible knowledge in drilling in CCUS or geothermal. There is so much that the industry has to apply beyond its boundaries, beyond its borders, and being considered monolithic doesn't help in telling that story. So I definitely think that's one of the fundamental problems with this lack of active brand development in helping sort of public perception, but also, you know, to your point, the regulatory landscape as well.
Yeah. Speaking of public perception, I don't know why I just thought of this, but are you familiar with I think it's like Just Stop Oil or something, and there's the group out of the maybe is it UK that like
it is
will put paint on, or they do some like really outlandish things to try and create awareness. They've even created a brand, you know what I mean? And I don't know how much, and even like Greta Thunberg, who's made some huge leaps and strides in her efforts, but she's also created a brand. And think of the power of that. And so now they're influencing, whether you agree with them or not is not the point, but by creating their brand, and they're not scientists, they're not engineers. If you were to ask them sort of some deep, complex technical questions about whether it be oil and gas or energy, they may have enough understanding to maybe get an idea of where it comes from. But think of the influence that they've created that will now sort of influence the decisions and perhaps votes or, you know, decisions that those people make, which will ultimately affect the future, right? So unless, when it comes to energy, to your point, the education piece, you know, building that brand just around energy in a more positive light, it will help then people be more interested to hopefully learn a little more, which again, comes back to the education piece, right? Do you make your way to the US fairly often, or is it just for?
Yeah, I try to. Yeah. Houston, we have our offices there in San Felipe and a lot of technology centers as well. So it's a trip I try and make 4 or 5 times a year. I spent a lot of time there as well in the past when I was in different positions. In Canada as well, I spent quite a bit of time in Edmonton, Fort McMurray, and Calgary as well. So it's great. I love heading over. It's great to get that opportunity.
Yeah. So I'm curious because I mean, again, I went to Europe just for a little trip, but how would you sort of compare and contrast energy branding in, say, where you're at compared to, say, here in the United States?
That's a really good question. With my experience in Houston, there's a lot more and a lot better understanding of the energy industry, downstream and production, oil and gas. Obviously, in Europe, the understanding of energy is a lot more at the use phase end. You know, it's less about downstream, and it's really focusing on the use phase and a lot of the efficiency and yes, we talk a lot about, especially in the UK, we have a huge amount of wind power that's produced, but we're talking a lot about distribution and how we can use power from different partners, you know, pulling across from interconnectors in Europe. So we don't talk so much about the North Sea, which is a huge part of the UK and Europe. Norway, Denmark, it's very, very important. I don't think it gets the same limelight that it does in the US in particular, and Canada as well. That's my personal feeling. The other, I mean, no one knows. When I turn around and say I work for SLB, Schlumberger in the past, no one knows the name. And I have to go and use my elevator pitch. You don't have that problem as much in the US. Certainly not in Houston. There's a much better understanding of the players and the industry itself.
Gotcha. No, it's again, because there's clearly some huge, I mean, obvious differences between each region. And so I was curious, you know, what the perception is. I live in a bubble here in Houston, right? It's like everyone and their dog, regardless of which side of the political spectrum you sit on, most people are like, yeah, this oil and gas thing is good. And they, you know, again, here in Houston, we've created it, but other parts of the world are completely different. So I appreciate you adding some color to that.
Yeah.
When we talk about aligning brand and market realities, how would you sort of describe how a brand communicates innovations aimed at making energy production more efficient and environmentally friendly? Because there's a lot of effort being put into that by a lot of the super majors, right? The BPs, the Equinors, this, here and even like Exxon, Chevrons. But I'm curious on your thoughts on that.
Yes, you're referring to sort of how our industry, the players in our industry, participate in the newer energy opportunities. Was that the question, Justin?
More or less. And so I'm curious, like how a brand, if you've got a brand, is it like, how can it improve how we communicate to the sort of just the general population of how we're trying to do a better job of producing?
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
I do. No, I do. Sorry. Yeah, absolutely. You've got to be authentic. You've got to be authentic to, one, understanding the perceptions that are inherent in the audiences. You've got to understand this. What is your capability, and what is it you can do for newer technologies, newer businesses, newer industries, in new energy? So for us, we can scale, we can innovate, we can industrialize. I think scaling is probably our biggest opportunity to help accelerate the transition, to help make a success out of, technologies that have been developed in either startups or other businesses as well. I think the brand can really center on those capabilities, and I think you do that. Like I said, if you do that really authentically, then I think you're going to help avoid some of the skepticism. There is a danger of the size of some of these companies, especially the operators, absorbing. I think, going back to your point earlier about partnerships, partner with these people rather than acquire. You've got to be on the journey. You've got to communicate the journey, the support, the leverage you can apply, and the brand is an important part of that. People have got to see that in the brand fundamentally, that I know their part as they help in the transition. So I think that's probably one of the most important parts as we look at that shift. We just launched a program, not plugging the program, so internal only anyway. It's called Energizer, and it's intrapreneurship. So it's showing people that we're even looking internally to develop businesses that can scale.
Oh, nice.
And it's kind of like a Shark Tank, right? Internally, we've got money, you pitch, and we're going to help you. And we've partnered with a lot of different global universities and accelerators, innovation accelerators, to help coach these individuals that have got these great ideas to make them a success.
No, I think I think it's so important, because a lot of people within big organizations a lot of times feel like they don't have a voice, and that entrepreneurial spirit often gets left behind because people just don't have time to evaluate random ideas. You know what I mean? But if you can create some form of like program to where people that maybe haven't been, I guess, like, because over time you develop biases, right? Or like, this is the way we've always done it, therefore this approach will never work because we've never done it like that. But having a healthy sort of merit-based sort of system that you can have all the ideas come to the table, I think is really unique. And again, like having that entrepreneurial or intrapreneurial spirit, as you guys like to call it, I applaud you guys for that, because I think it's to continue to evolve and create and have that level of just vision for people to and for them to contribute to the overall greater success of the company. Is you need everyone contributing, and so that's really neat. When you look at so what would you, are there advantages for traditional oil and gas companies, whether it be service companies or operators, to collaborate with alternative energy sectors to diversify their brand image? Do you think that's something that, because the adoption of renewable energy is continuously increasing, do you think there's an advantage there, or do you feel like they should just kind of stay in their lane?
No, I personally, I think we must. I think you've got to show the industry changing and developing, again, authentically, in a way that will support the transition. I think you can take your position as a company, right? You can double down, you can really evolve. And there are lots of cases in history where some have, well in advance of that happening. BP is probably a good example of that. They were probably 20 years ahead of themselves when Lord Brown pushed hard in focusing on that. But I think if you can do it authentically, if you can do it consistently, it's not a fad, right? It is built into your DNA. It's built into the brand, externally and internally, to the energizer point, right? If you can show that you're fostering innovation internally and that you want to do that externally as well, and that you're trying to partner, and probably to that point as well, partnerships will help authentically show your commitment to fostering innovation and in new energies and new businesses, then yeah, I do think we should. But again, if you can't do it authentically, then don't.
Yeah.
You know that, and that's for
the box.
Absolutely. You've got investors that you've got to satisfy, and I think they've got to understand, is this an opportunity for the company? Does it jive? And then you've got employees, and you've got, Gen Pop and different, or audiences that need to understand that and feel like you're being genuine in the approach. No right or wrong answer, to be honest. I don't think you should or shouldn't, but I think that's a great opportunity.
I think there is. I think it presents tons of opportunity. But like you said, I mean, it starts at the leadership level, and depending on whether you're public or not, I mean, you can't have, like, I feel like if you're going to collaborate with alternative energy sectors, there has to be buy-in from all the stakeholders. You may have some pushback, but I think healthy debate or some challenges to the train of thought is important. But I think having a radically open mind towards what it's going to take to continue to evolve and gain confidence, whether it be from the investor community or just the general population, again, I think comes back to being authentic and having an open mind, which I'm starting to see a lot more of, especially with energy companies, traditional energy companies. Just the level of open-mindedness towards other ideas is increasing, which I think is super healthy for the advancement of especially oil and gas. When it's talking with oil and gas, I kind of mentioned it earlier, the avatar, and then, the gas station, people blowing up because of, smoking a cigarette or whatever. We do a lot of crisis management.
We do.
I'm curious, how could a company's brand strategy incorporate crisis management, especially given on the oil and gas industry's frequent public scrutiny?
There was a famous article produced on us as an example, and it was titled Schlumberger, the biggest company you've never heard of.
Okay.
And you kind of feel like a Bond villain, nefarious, stroking a cat on a chair, right?
Yeah.
There's nothing positive about not having any brand equity.
Yeah.
You've got to build an understanding of the business, obviously a positive understanding of the business, but you've got to build brand equity so that in a crisis you can call on it. You pay into the bank, and then in a crisis you can call on it and say, look, this is what we've done. We're not a nefarious villain or criminal. We're trying to do good, and mistakes happen, and obviously in crisis there is the need to be open, transparent, active, and communicating constantly. That there's a whole crisis comms theory on one side, but they need a brand to fall back on. They need to know that people have a deep understanding of, okay, this is a good company. They're trying their hardest. They've got great values. They've got great brand equity. And I've got to understand that they're doing their best in solving this crisis. Again, in an industry that's not really invested that much time in their brands, and I'm not talking for all, obviously, but that's something that's got to change. And I think crises in the industry will probably only increase. But that I think is one of the most important thing. Again, to values, we talked about the values, we talked about those other elements that are connected with brand. So yeah, I think that's probably the most important thing. Build brand equity so that you can fall back on it, for sure.
Yeah. No, that's again, it goes far deeper than what you see on social media or billboards or whatever the case, right?
Yeah.
do
Yeah,
you oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, I was just, you were talking, part of the equity, and I'm going back to a point you made earlier about the people, certainly the thought leaders in the organization. You can build a lot of trust in an organization by exposing the people that are your true thought leaders.
Yeah.
And I think if you can highlight that as well, the individuals that stay with the company during a crisis, that are there, and you surface and you show that you're, again, that the intentions are positive, and you're out there and you're developing brand through those thought leaders as well. I think that's another tool, that's another channel that can help in a crisis.
Interesting. Is that something that you guys, or that you feel that you guys are doing
We're
well,
starting,
actually?
yeah. We're starting. We've got this. I mean, as you know, the people are just incredible. The scientists, the engineers, the technologists. It's them that make up our company, but many others as well. And I think if you can give them the opportunity to shine, if you can valorize those individuals,
Yeah.
and we're starting to do this through a online insights portal where, you know, they've just got the opportunity to talk about what they're passionate about.
Yeah.
It's incredible, and it's not a marketing platform. We don't want it to be a marketing platform. It's for them. It's to market them, not the product, services, or company. Yeah. It's brilliant. It's been such a. I passionately read it myself over and over. There's some brilliant thoughts, and I certainly encourage others to go on that journey. It's along the lines of education as well, right?
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's with kind of tying it all together. I mean, do you have any good examples, whether it's at SLB or just something that you've been aware of, where effective branding helped mitigate a situation that could have had a negative impact on the, whether it be the public perception or financial health of the business? Does anything come to mind?
There are companies, I'm trying to think, in our industry, certainly in tech, you've got the likes of Apple, right? They faced a lot of challenges in China when it came to manufacturing issues, and yet
good example,
that hasn't really phased them, right?
Yeah.
I mean, your own perception of Apple, you feel confident that they've got this.
Yeah.
You know, they've built so much positive brand equity that they have managed that very well. And it doesn't really feature in our own perception of Apple. And it was a big thing with the different suppliers. So I think that's an example of where positive brand equity, you know, gives them the benefit of the doubt. I think that's what it does. There are examples. I can think sadly of more examples where brand has caused a failure of a company. Union Carbide was a business that had a massive crisis in India where they caused a lot of, I think it was a chemical spill. And I think pretty much that caused the end of them. They had nothing to fall back on.
Wow.
And that was, you know, so there's, it's a shame that we can think of more negative than positive, but your example, certainly to prove the point.
Yeah, no, your example with Apple is I mean, everyone can understand it and it are probably familiar with it. But again, it further emphasizes the importance of it. And so, but no, again, it's a very fascinating conversation, Giles. And I'm glad that we were able to talk about this. Hopefully the listeners will look at branding a little differently. And to kind of, you know, close things out, I like to sort of ask a couple more personal questions, but I'm curious, man, like where you live. I mean, it's a beautiful part of the world. What does an ideal Friday night look like to you? Like, obviously today's Friday. If you had all the money in the world, you could go anywheres. You know, what would you do? Who would you spend it with? And how would you describe that?
It's a great question, because I'm passionate about my Friday afternoons, and any of my team, if they're on a call with me, they'll know I pop out. I leave the call every 20 to 30 minutes.
Okay.
And I've got a wood-fired Swedish hot tub.
Oh, nice.
And I love it. And a hot tub's a hot tub, right? They're great things, don't get me wrong. But the fact that it's wood-fired, and the fact that on a Friday afternoon by about 1 or 2 o'clock, I need to light it, and I need to go out there, and I need to stoke it, and I need to make sure it's okay. Yeah. I deserve the hot tub on a Friday evening. Man, I've put the effort into it. It keeps hot for the weekend. It then cools off during the week, so I'm not having to heat it all the time. So that for me, I try and keep it as a bit of a ritual. We get the hot tub heated up. The kids go in first. We'll join them, and my wife and I. They'll leave, and we'll just sit there and soak in the view and soak in the evening. A bottle of beer. In summer, a barbecue. In winter, you get out quickly, run in, and curl up on the sofa in front of the TV. I'm quite a family guy, so for me, a family in on a Friday is fantastic. Saturday night can be something different.
Nice. No, I love that answer, man. So I'm curious, do you ever use it as like a cold plunge? Because I imagine it gets pretty damn cold.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, actually, I love it just as much as a cold plunge than I do as a hot tub.
Oh wow. Nice.
So it's a great thing. We bought that before we'd even fixed the central heating in our house. We got an old house, and we saw that as a priority. So it was great.
No way.
It was a great purchase.
That's awesome. So the wood, so is the fire underneath the hot tub, and then it heats?
Yeah.
What's the material of the hot tub?
It's a heat exchanger. It's a little wood burning stove that's inside the hot tub, and the water goes around it. Yeah. And there's a back to it, and the water just heats up off the back. It's a clever little bit of kit.
Wow. Did you? So is it something that you put together, or something you bought online, or what?
No. It's a Swedish. I think very, very popular in Sweden, and they ship them over here, and they're about a third of the price of electric models. So
no way.
You get a good deal. You don't get the jets or the lights or the speakers or the waterfall. It is just a tub.
Yeah,
that you can sit in. Yeah.
Hey, and that's what it should be all about. Here in America, man, we try and bedazzle everything: lights, cameras, YouTube connected to a football game, connected to a massive speaker system with flashing lights. Like that's what we do.
But that's okay. That's Saturday night. Like I said, Friday night is different, right?
Exactly. Awesome, Giles. Well, again, this has been absolutely fascinating. I'm sure you do a lot of reading and research, but if people are curious to learn more about the power of branding, let's say they're part of management who's responsible for marketing and branding, are there any good resources that you like to reference, or any good books that you could share with the audience?
I don't mean to draw people away from your podcast, but I've been listening to one by Azim Azhar. It's a Harvard Business Review podcast, and it was one of the podcasts. It's called The Exponential View. It's one of the podcasts that helped to understand exponential change in industry, and although not directly about brand, it's about how brand can position yourself in exponential change. So that was something that I personally used as a reference.
I love it.
But also a little bit about our own resource on this insights. Again, it's not a marketing channel. It's just there understanding how thought leaders can help with developing brand as well, because I even for myself, I read through those articles and I feel great. I feel like, wow, what a resource that we're sitting on. What a capability. It makes you feel good inside, when you're questioning things in the industry. So it's those are some of the things that I turn to.
Perfect. No, those are great answers. Thank you for sharing those. If folks are wanting to reach out, I mean, you're on LinkedIn, I would imagine. Yes. Folks connect or follow Giles. And again, if SLB has done a phenomenal job. You're coming up on your your first year anniversary here. A lot of exciting things since the rebrand. I think it's been going great. I mean, again, from the outside looking in, does SLB, do you guys have any big plans, any parties, champagne popping? I mean, what are you guys going to do on the 1 year, man?
Do you know, we did so much of that on the launch. We're kind of happy to have a slightly quieter 1 year anniversary. We've got a great look back on everything that's been achieved, from ADIPEC and the events and CERAWeek to ringing the bell at the New York Stock Exchange. So we're really focusing on what we've achieved in a year, which has been incredible. And then obviously going forward, what's next for the brand, especially around developing the master brand, thought leadership, and all of those exciting projects as well. And obviously the other events that we'll be attending, very different events that we'll be attending in 2023 and 2024. So it's going to be an exciting, just a little celebrate, an opportunity to put things down and focus a little bit on the brand for half a day or so. Okay.
Well, the last question I have is, obviously you guys have been working on building brand as always. Are you guys on TikTok, and have you doubled down on YouTube Shorts? because you know that's where all the attention is right now.
That's it. You know, like I said, we've come from a very conservative industry and a very conservative brand position. So we're heading in that direction. Not yet TikTok. YouTube Shorts, we're getting close. We're getting close. We certainly taken the format, but not yet fully committed.
Okay, well that's where all the underpriced attention is, man. So don't lose sight. But no, Giles, thanks again. For everyone out there, you're so welcome. Please subscribe, review, share this with someone, and always remember, let's make sure we're approaching energy with a radically open mind. Be kind, and always remember that everyone deserves access to energy, and we is greater than me. Thanks, everybody.
Absolutely.